Gotta get my head back in the game.
Was it productive?
Yeah, it was wonderful. Well, I was in Israel for 48 hours.
Okay.
And then, I dropped off Yirmi and I went to Haifa to see the Browns and Benji. And then I went to pay a Shiva call to the Poland family, Goldberg, Poland. So that's how I spent my time. Okay. All right. So we are, with the last Shuva that we saw, is it permissible to take Gramps' money and put him in a new apartment, even to the point of deceiving him by making him think that he's paying the same rent that he used to? But we're doing it for his own good so he can be nearby. So Rav Sharaga's conclusion was that in a situation like that, you have to actually go to a Beis Din and get some kind of psak that this is the right thing to do, because it's not so simple to be able to sort of co-opt someone else's life and their assets and things like that. Okay. Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph. New Shaila. Kana Sefer Torah Miganav. You purchase a Sefer Torah from a Ganav. Ha'im haba'olim tzrichim lahachzir lo es chaspo. So you find does the owner have to return the money? So let's see what the shaila is. Ani gabbai beis hakneses. I'm the gabbai of my shul. Be'echad hashabbasos shachachti linol et ha'heichal. One Shabbos I forgot to lock the main sanctuary. V'ganvu sefer Torah atik shahaya ben artik shel kesef. And an old sefer Torah that was in a silver holder was stolen. Imagine one of those Sephardi hard shell holders that's made out of silver. That's probably quite valuable. Matzlemot beit hakneset silmu taganav. So the cameras in the shul were able to get a picture of the ganav. Val yedei kach hamishtara tafsa oto, and that's how the police nabbed them. Uvechippus beveito matzu et nartika kesef beli hasefer Torah. They go to his house. They find the silver case, but the Sefer Torah is nowhere to be found. La'achar mikein nimtza Sefer HaTorah etzel socher sifrei Torah shekana oto haganav. And later, the Sefer Torah itself was found. It was in the possession of a guy who sells Sifrei Torah. He sells he sells hot Sifrei Torah. But he didn't. So he claims I didn't know. A guy came to me with a Sefer Torah. He said it was his. Yeah, he opened up his raincoat. Yeah. So, but maybe he claimed it was in his family. It's, he made up a whole story. So, do we have any kind of halachic obligation to pay the buyer for what he paid for the Sefer Torah that he paid to the Ganav? Or does he have to give us back the Sefer Torah, and he's the one who loses? He's out the money. So what do you say? They caught the thief. Well, there is no money. He just stole a Sefer Torah. He stole the case.
Where's the money he got for selling it?
Oh, where's the money? Oh, yeah, it's up his nose. Who knows? Yeah, yeah. But he bought. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So in secular law, there's this concept of a bona fide purchaser for value without notice. So you buy a hot car and you don't know about it, or property or something like that. Title usually goes to the bona fide, purchaser for value. What do you want from him? I didn't know. I bought it in good faith and all that. So title usually goes to the purchaser. But if this guy is the fence, whatever wasn't bona fide, then he wouldn't get title normally. in
So,
secular.
explain the term bona fide.
Bona fide just means it's Latin for good faith. So honestly, with, he believed that it was a good, deal, no suspicion of any, bad news going on behind the scenes. So that's what it means, as opposed to bad faith.
Well, how are we supposed to ascertain that?
Would
That's,
the price be indicative?
is that really,
Like,
is that up to the judge to make that determination?
A judge would decide the bona fides, if you cross-examine, say, well, how did you come to buy this, right? Well,
And how much did you pay? Did you pay
How
like,
much did you pay? Did you get, you bought it at, like a hot, here's a Rolex for $10, right? It's not a bona fide sale for a Rolex, because it's not anywhere near.
Yeah, but there's so much,
value.
Gray area there,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yeah, there is.
That's
It's
why
hard-
none of us
it's
are
hard
answering
to-
the
It's hard
question.
to prove bad faith, whatever, but depending on the circumstances, you could pay it. And if he's not bona fide for value, which means reasonable, that fair value for the price, if he underpaid, $10 for the Sefer Torah, it's not a bona fide.
Yeah, but there's a lot of times where a buyer will underpay for a Sefer Torah because it has such subjective, especially a used Sefer Torah, has such subjective value if it's an old Sefer Torah.
So far undervalued that it means it's not a proper transaction. It's hot, you're gonna give him $10 for it. Objectively, and most of the time. You
Okay,
don't know what's going on inside.
The only two parties who know how much they paid for it is the fence and
Yeah.
the crook. So how do we even know
Yeah.
what that is?
But that's the concept anyway. If it's bona fide, title goes to the purchaser for value without notice, meaning, did you know, did someone tell you, whatever? Or if not, if it is not bona fide, it doesn't get title. If it is bona fide, it does get title.
Is there any factor that the Gabbai didn't lock the shul? Was he any responsibility for that?
yeah, it's a valid issue. But
That's not the question.
the fact of the matter is, they retrieved the Sefer Torah. They were able to retrieve it, thankfully, through the police. The question now is, on the guy who bought it, and now what does the shul have to do to make the guy who bought it whole? And in the times of the Torah, if the Ganef doesn't have the money, he'd be sold into slavery, right? Listen, that's the law of an Eved Ivri, a Hebrew slave. But this guy's probably, a Nebuch. He's a nobody.
Yeah.
He's going to sit in jail, or maybe in a mental institution. So how do we make the people whole here? Okay. So let's take a look and see if there's an issue of bona fide in halacha. Ki yadua asur liknos kol davar shechezkaso ganuv. As is known, you're not allowed to purchase something that is assumed to be stolen. B'chol mi shekano mimenu avono gadol minaso. Anyone who steals purchases fenced goods from a ganav is committing an egregious sin. As he says, gadol avono minaso. His sin is too great for him to bear. It is so overbearing, the penalty for this. Me'achar shehu machzik yidei ovrei aver. Why? Because you're supporting sinners. You're helping people continue this. If a guy would steal stuff and he couldn't pawn it, then he would stop stealing. But you're supporting his bad habit. Kamosha haGemara omeret b'kiddushin kilo ha'achbar ganav elachuro ganav. The Gemara has a metaphor for this. It says it's not the mouse that steals the cheese; it's the hole in the wall that steals the cheese. Right? Why? Because if the mouse couldn't escape, then there would be no mice stealing cheese. If a ganav would not be able to find anyone to pawn off the item, he wouldn't steal because of. Yeah, that's true. It's a good analogy. Because of Harambam, the alzen nemar cholek im ganav sonei nafsha, and that's why the Rambam quotes a pasuk in Mishlei that says, "He who splits with a ganav, who splits the assets with a ganav, hates his own soul because he's so self-destructive." And as the Makor Baruch says, Kain Pasak Marin b'Shulchan Aruch b'Zel Lashon. This is the exact language of the Shulchan Aruch. Asr liknos mehaganav hachefetz sheganav v'avon gadol hu. You're not allowed to steal a stolen item from a ganav, and it's a very egregious sin. Shahari machzik yidei overei aveira v'garim lo lignov ginevos acheros, because you're supporting sinners and you're causing him to do further crime. There's a guy who was proud of telling me how when he goes to Turkey, he buys fake Rolexes and fake Gucci stuff. He says it's a fraction of the price and you can't tell the difference. I said, yeah, but you shouldn't be doing that. That's like you're helping Ganavim, right? You shouldn't be buying counterfeit stuff. Yeah, but it's so beautiful. It's like, everyone compliments me on my Rolex and stuff. So anyway, sometimes speaking to someone, you feel like you're talking to the wall, when it comes to stuff like this. Shim lo yimsa lokeach eino gonev. So as the Shulchan Aruch writes, if a ganav would not find anyone to pawn it off to, he wouldn't steal. V'chein pasak od v'hosif shamaran shaha'osek kein over al lifnei iver. And that if the Shulchan Aruch further paskins that if you support a ganav by buying from him, you're over on the isser of lifnei iver lo sitein michshel. You're not allowed to cause someone else to sin. Now, uva ofen shlo hityashu haba'olim b'nitfas haganav. So if the owner, which is, let's say it's the shul is the owner, or let's say one of the members of the shul is the owner of the Sefer Torah, and the stolen item, the owner did not give up hope, and the ganaf is caught. And this seems to be a case where they didn't give up hope because they turned over the footage over to the police. They were hoping to catch the guy. Yes. And in the interim, the ganaf had already sold this stolen item. The person who purchased the item has to return the item to the original owner. But the rabbis did something called takanas hashuk. So umi takanas hashuk, chachamim tiknu shetzarech bal hachefetz l'shalem lalokeach et hamachir sheshilem leganav. The rabbis instituted the law that you have to, and this is a rabbinic law, this is not a biblical law. Biblically speaking, if you buy from a ganav, even if it's bona fide, right, you lose the item that you lose the money. You have to forfeit the item. It wasn't a valid sale, and you forfeit the money that you spent. But the rabbis made what's called a takanas hashuk. They said if we don't have some remedy in place, people are not going to be good Samaritans and they're not going to want to turn over items that were stolen. So they basically said that you've got to pay whatever the buyer paid for the stolen item, you've got to give to him. Because he bought it innocently without realizing that it was stolen. But this is only a rabbinic institution to protect the marketplace. Right? The biblical law is the stolen party, the party who was robbed, can say, it's my item. Why should I have to pay for it? I didn't do anything wrong. But the rabbis said that if people are going to behave that way, he says people are not going to want to buy stuff. It's going to create an interruption in the marketplace. It's going
That's
to
what's protecting the marketplace.
right.
Commerce.
It's going to disrupt regular commercial activity because people are going to be afraid to buy things. Because who knows? Maybe someone will come along and confiscate this because it turns out to have been stolen. And he'll end up, the metaphor being, I'll end up leaving my money on the horn of a deer. In other words, just like if you stick your money on a wild animal's head, it's just going to run off with it and you'll never see it again. People are going to be scared that if they pay money for goods and they have to worry that maybe someone's going to come and confiscate it, they won't engage in commerce. Lachein tiknu chazal shahaba'olim mishalmim lakona kama shashilim laganav below kilomet hachayfetz. And that's why the rabbis made this institution, that the aggrieved party has to pay the person for whatever he shelled out for what he thought was a bona fide sale. And then they can then turn to the ganav and sue him to retrieve whatever money was stolen, whatever he stole. So if the guy maybe there is a way for him to eventually pay them back. Now,
how do you know how much you just believe him when he tells you how much he paid for it?
Well, that's an interesting thing. And like, we're going to have to see if the guy can be believed, right? He probably would have to present, optimally a bill of purchase, right? So that's under normal circumstances where the buyer says, I had no idea. It was bona fide, as Marv has said. But what if the guy buys from a ganav mefursam, a well-known ganav? Like he parks his truck on, at some place, and he's selling TVs off from the back of his truck. Okay, right? Right, Moshe. You're not gonna buy from that guy. So tzarech lahachzir et hachefetz la ba'olim lo shum tamur. So then the buyer has to return the items that were stolen, that turned out to be stolen, without getting any compensation. Uladasa shulchan aruch afal pi shehu lo yada shechefetz zeganav. And even if he claims that I didn't know that it was stolen, afilu hachi lo hayat tzarech liknos zemimenu. But you shouldn't have bought it, because if the circumstances indicate, or the person is well known, has a reputation already of selling, of fencing goods, so then you shouldn't have taken that risk, because you should have investigated. Avoladas haramasham rak im hu yada. The Ramah is a little bit more lenient on the side of the buyer. He says if the buyer genuinely didn't know that it was stolen, then the owner has to pay him. But if he knew for a fact that it was stolen, does he not get any compensation? But if the guy says, I didn't know that it was stolen, even if this fellow is known to be a suspect of stealing items, the person can say, I didn't know. He represented it as being his. I didn't realize that it was stolen. And therefore, the original owner has to pay the buyer for whatever he paid. And that's how the Shel Shlomo paskins. Aval hashach pasak bazekedas moran shebeganav mefursam lo asu takanas hashuk v'yikchu imenu es hachefetz lo shum tamur. But the shach paskins like the mechaber, right, and says no. If circumstances indicate that you should be suspicious and you weren't, you can't say I didn't know, okay? And therefore, the original owner can take back his item without paying the buyer. V'im ha'koina omer, kavanati ha'ita l'tova, kedei lahatzil chayfetz zeh mehaganav shelo yishar tachas yado. Now, what if the guy who purchased the Sefer Torah, he, let's say, owns a Judaica store, or he's a well-known sofer in the community, and he says, I realized that this was stolen, but the guy wouldn't release it to me unless I gave him money. I wanted to retrieve the Sefer Torah and get it back to the owner. I had to give the guy a few $100 in order to do that. Afilu im hu ganav mefursam v'hu yada sha'chayfetz ganav tzarech lahachzir lo et hakesef. Then the original owner has to pay him for whatever he shelled out, because he basically saved the Sefer Torah for him. So,
Wouldn't you try and play a little role there a little bit? Because if he delayed a long time before saying anything, then there might be some questions.
right,
If he answered right away, or let them know right away, then it's more sincere.
yes, right. Let's say several months go by and he hasn't said anything, and then he gets a visit from the police saying, have you seen this? Do you mind if we take a look at your merchandise? And then they discover the Torah. Then that's indicate, oh, that's Sefer Torah. Yes, I was right, and he puts on a whole show, then he's not, that's not a legitimate claim. Amnam, and that's what he says in the last paragraph. Amnam im mochichim hadvarim shahasocher yada shasefer Torah ganuv. But unfortunately, even Sofrim can be unscrupulous. Okay, even Sofrim can be unscrupulous, and that's, I guess, an important lesson. Just because a guy has a beard and is a rabbi and puts on all of the and expresses piety, there was a guy that I know who sat in jail because he misrepresented a Sefer Torah as being this very, very let me just it was in all the papers. I'm not going to actually, I'm not going to reveal his name, but I just want to see. He sat in jail. I'm just trying to. It was a huge scandal a few years back.
US or Israel?
It was in the U.S. There's even a Wikipedia page. This is a Baltimore rabbi and Torah scribe who falsely claimed he had rescued Holocaust-era Torah scrolls from Eastern Europe, selling the scrolls at inflated prices. On August 24th, 2011, he was arrested on charges of mail fraud and wire fraud, and he pleaded guilty on February 2nd, 2012. He was convicted of 2 counts of mail and wire fraud in a Manhattan federal court on December 17, 2012. Ulyss, whatever his name is, began serving a 51-month prison sentence at the Federal Correctional Institute in Otisville, New York. And he was there until August 26, 2016. This is a guy that I was in yeshiva with. I was in yeshiva really with his brother, his brother-in-law. What?
Why such a heavy sentence?
What's the wire? What are the charges?
What was it?
I mean, someone sells something for an inflated price.
I'm surprised there's such a heavy jail
It's
sentence.
the same way they got Capone. They with the whole thing, use the mail, it's a federal offense, right?
The co-owner of the Jewish bookstore of such and such a city, he claimed that he had personally traveled to Eastern Europe and beyond to recover Torah scrolls lost or hidden during the Holocaust, including some from the sites of concentration camps at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. He said that during his travels, he had been beaten and imprisoned and called himself the Jewish Indiana Jones during a Torah dedication in 2004. In court, he admitted that from 2004 to 2010, he had made up the stories of his travels. He had never been to the places he had claimed. The Torahs he sold did not have the claimed provenance. Okay. He created the nonprofit foundation Save a Torah, purportedly to finance his travels and the restoration of the rescued Torah scrolls, dedicated to rescuing and restoring Torah scrolls hidden, lost, or stolen during the Holocaust and other world upheavals and placing them in Jewish congregations. Between 2004 and 2010, Save a Torah received over $1.4 million in contributions from over 800 donors to assist in rescuing and restoring the Torahs. Instead,
That's why he went.
That's why, okay.
which is a more sophisticated operation. Instead, he sold the Torah scrolls he had obtained by other means, partly at inflated prices. According to prosecutors, he defrauded the charity and its donors of $862,000. Congregations that acquired Torah scrolls from Sefer Torah included New York Central Synagogue, Congregation Kol Ami of such and others. In January 2010, the Washington Post reported that many Torahs purportedly rescued from Holocaust sites in Eastern Europe appeared to be old Torah scrolls mostly acquired when American congregations closed and resold at high prices because so-and-so's unsubstantiated assertion that they were rescued from Holocaust-related sites. Similar questions were reported in an April 2010 New York Times article. Okay, so in 2011, he was arrested and charged with fraud. According to prosecutors, he made up the stories about the Torah's origins. He was also accused of taking more than $340,000 of the $1.2 million raised by Sefer Torah, including $145,000 or more for his personal use. Through an attorney, he initially denied the allegations. He later pled guilty to fraud, having used money from the fraud to cover his personal expenses. You ask yourself a question: why do people do things like this? Like this guy was a Ben Torah. He had a Judaica store, reputable, and I don't know. It's just it's like a sickness. You'd have to say to yourself, like, who would? This guy is my age. This guy is my age. Yeah. So he was, when he did this, he was probably in his late 40s, early 50s. Yeah. Strange, huh? Okay. Anyway, so if circumstantial evidence indicates that the purchaser of the Torah knew that it was stolen when he bought it, then we would revert to the psak of the Mechaber, that we do not make any remedy for the guy who buys something knowing that it's stolen or buying from a known ganav. And in that circumstance, he can't later claim, oh, I did it to save the Torah, to return it to its rightful owners. Because he easily could have just called the police. Okay? Without having to shell out money. The fact that he shelled out a good amount of cash is indicative of the fact that he wanted to keep it for himself. So the police really have to sort of look into this and see what the evidence indicates. So Rav Rafali says Ankava, I don't know who that is. I'm not familiar with this sefer. And the sefer Pa'amonei Zahav says, he also writes that Im Haganav Eino Mefursam, Avol Yadua She'achefetz Ganav. Says even if this is not a well-known ganav, but you can tell based on the fact that the guy who comes in to sell it looks like a ganav, right? Or is looking for some really low price for it. Ein bozeh takanas hashuk. And there's no such thing as takana shuk. I guess pawn shop people have to really be concerned about this kind of thing also. Behevi sham shekain pasku hamaymer kadishin uveshut beis Yehuda v'chein kasav b'pischei Choshen. Rav Bloy also paskins this way. So, and then he quotes the Ktsos, who says it's only with a Jewish ganav who steals Sifrei Torah. He says, oh, Shavadai, he says, there's no takanas hashuk. There's no idea of making restitution to the buyer of the stolen goods, because the buyer of the stolen goods will protect them anyway. Aval im haganav goy. However, if the person who stole the Sefer Torah was a goy, the Rishonim write that there's a special mitzvah to preserve the Sefer Torah. Shamisha kona mehem yikabel es kaspo b'chazara, afal pisha lo kona mehem kedei lahashivam liba'alehem. Then there's a special remedy, even if the guy who buys the Torah, the Judaica store, buys it knowing that it's stolen, but buys it from a goy, he's still entitled to compensation. Now, why is that? Because so great is our desire to get it out of the hands of the goy and to protect the integrity of the Sefer Torah. So there's like an even greater consideration. We're even prepared to reward a bad party, a bad actor who buys knowing that it's stolen. We'll pay him for it just so that we can get it back and restore it to its honorable position. And the K'tzos acknowledges that this is not well agreed upon. He says, nonetheless, you can't force the buyer to relinquish the Sefer Torah without giving him money. Okay, and therefore we have to conclude that Rav Sharaga's tshuva is dealing with the case where the person who stole the Sefer Torah is another Jew. Because according to the K'tzos, if it's a goy, then even if the Judaica store knew that it was stolen and circumstances indicate that they wanted to keep it and deal in stolen goods, you still have to pay them.
Then you have to trust them on what he paid, right?
Well, you'll have to figure out whatever you can to get the Sefer Torah back, right? And you may have to get a Beis Din involved and the police involved, but that's the bottom line. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. Have a great day, everybody.